Welcome to Venice Views, and today we have another snapshot in history, our series about the history of Venice. And today with me are David and Joanne Farley, who know quite a bit about Venice's history because, well, actually they've lived it. Welcome, David and Joanne. It's nice to see you today. And just to get started, tell us a little bit about how you ended up in Venice.
In 1948, my dad did not like living in Indiana and the weather. He brought all of our family, 6 children, which is quite an accomplishment in those years to bring 6 children, travel to Florida. I remember coming to Venice in 48. We came down US 41. The road was high crowned. When you came through Osprey and you went through a big overgrown area where the Australian pines were, that it was actually like a tunnel that you drove through.
Wow.
A high crown road, patch on patch. It was really rough riding. You couldn't do 45 miles an hour. It was just really rough road. We went on from Venice down to Miami and back around and came back. In 1952, Dad sold his business, his funeral business he established in 1932 in Indianapolis. He sold in 52. We moved to St. Petersburg, Florida, then to Tampa, and we got here. Dad moved here in 1961.
And so you spent part of your time in St. Pete. How old were you when you moved there?
I was 10 years old when we moved to St. Petersburg.
Okay. And did you meet your bride in St. Petersburg?
I met her in high school in Tampa. We'd moved from St. Petersburg to Tampa, and we went to Plant High School, both of us together.
Okay.
In the 10th grade, my friend Retha and I had Latin, and he was dating Retha, so I met him when he'd come by after Latin class to see Retha, and then I started dating him in my senior year in high school.
Are you still friends with the...
Yes. Actually, Retha came down with her husband a month or so ago and had lunch with us.
Oh, that's really great, yeah. So then the two of you evidently went on this adventure to Venice together.
Actually, we didn't get married till after.
Oh, okay.
I moved here in 62, and then we got married in 64.
I graduated from high school in 61, and then I went to Florida State University. I have a degree in nursing.
And so then you came down here. Did you get married in Venice?
We got married in Tampa at the church I'd been going to there. And when we married, we moved into the Venice Municipal Trailer Park and lived in an 8x35 trailer that belonged to David's uncle.
And that was in the 60s?
In 65, 64 and 5. And then in 60, and I worked at Venice Hospital for a couple of months. Venice Hospital at that time was 2 stories. It still had the hotel attached where the OB was, and the middle part and the south wing. So.
Was that your field? Was it the OB?
I did work a little OB. But when I first worked there, I worked on the quote new nursing station. It had 35 beds. It was a medical surgical. And then in 65, David decided he needed to go to mortuary college. So we went to Indianapolis for a year. It was more like a trade school. And I worked at Community Hospital in Indianapolis on an IV team.
Was that your first Midwestern winter?
Yes.
Was it your last?
The only whole winter in the north.
You were glad to get back home.
Yes. And then when we got back home, we lived in where the offices are at the funeral home were apartments. So we lived in the back apartment at the funeral home, and then the front apartment at the funeral home while I worked at Venice Hospital again.
Oh, that was convenient, just down the street. You could walk to work and
right.
Right. And so in those days, Venice Hospital was still delivering babies, right?
Yes, they. Our oldest daughter was born there, Dr. Thompson, and he let David into the delivery room. The evening supervisor was really very irritated by that. However, at that point, Dr. Thompson knew David because before EMS, the funeral homes were the ambulance service.
Mm-hmm.
So David had a key to the ER, and he would bring the patients in, call upstairs, and the nurse upstairs would call the doctor on call. And at that time, there were 16 doctors, and they rotated the ER, all of them.
Mm.
And so then when the doctor came in, David would turn into an attendant. So Doc Thompson knew that David would be okay in the delivery room. Then in '69, the hospital closed the OB, and our other two daughters were born in Sarasota.
It just wasn't profitable? There weren't that many children being born here? Or?
Well, most OBs work in the red. However, Venice did not have a pediatrics, and so it was really probably safer to go to Sarasota. And now they have a phase 3 NICU there, so that's good.
Mm-hmm. Were the roads better by then to get up there?
No.
Did you have many babies born on the way?
It was still a 2-lane Crown Road, and it took 3 hours to get to Tampa.
Oh, wow.
So, yes, the second one, my second child was okay, but the third one, I was only up there for 19 minutes before I had her.
Enough time, right?
Just in time.
Oh, great. So now you and your dad, I guess, are working at the mortuary at this time?
When we opened the funeral home, there was my dad and my brothers and myself, so there are 4 boys. Mm-hmm. At one time, we were the largest family of funeral directors in the state of Florida, with my dad and 4 brothers, 5 of us all having licenses. But when we opened, there was nobody there but Farley at the facility. That was the whole employees. It was interesting things when you talked about earlier the road to Sarasota. When they finally decided they were going to 4-lane it, they had a contract with Cohn Brothers to do that. And one of the things in the contract was that they had to keep equipment on. There was no time limit to when to finish, but they had to keep equipment working on the road. So they had enough jobs around the state that they got this to a certain point, and then they just put one roller on there, and that roller ran from Sarasota to Venice back and forth all the time for months. And the road was not being improved at all, and finally the road department got after Cohn Brothers and kicked them in gear and got them going. But
no, so David and his brothers actually helped Pat Pattison build the building.
Which building?
The funeral
home where you are now on Nokomis Avenue. Was that the first funeral home in Venice?
No, there was another funeral home on Miami Avenue, but when we built on Nokomis Avenue, there was no pavement from Nokomis, from our corner south.
Oh, really?
To the hospital. That was all dirt road.
Morrill.
Interesting. So where was the other funeral home on Tampa? Was it in the 200 block there?
On Miami Avenue, where the arcade goes through there.
Yes.
There was a funeral home there.
On the right hand or left hand?
As you're going west, side. It's on the left side.
On the
south side.
Interesting. Okay. So now you all have this funeral home. What about the cemetery?
Cemetery. I had wanted to do a cemetery for years, and kept trying to do that, and couldn't handle it myself. One day, Reverend Bill Mosier was in for a service, and I told Bill I certainly would like to put a cemetery, and he said, "Well, let's do it. So let's get an investment group." We did. Him and I put 10 guys together. We started that. went to the county with a piece of property that we had off Havana Road, and the Venice Farms Association were up in arms. They didn't want some commercial development in there, and they spoke about how terrible it would be to have all those haunted things in their neighborhood. So the county commission said, we will give you a permit if you find acreage that has no house within 1 mile. So we went to Frank Blackburn. Frank Blackburn had property that there was no houses, and we bought the property that we got. So we've got 65 acres for the cemetery.
And what year was that?
That was 1975.
75. And before that, where were people who died in Venice buried?
They're either in the Nokomis Methodist Church Cemetery, the old Jesse Knight Cemetery in Nokomis, or up in Sarasota at Sarasota Memorial, or Gulf Pines down in Inglewood.
Okay. Well, now my favorite story, all the Venice stories I know, is about Fritz the dog. Does that ring a bell with you?
My dad was encouraged to run for election against Smitty Brohard as the mayor. And my dad took out the papers and then decided at the last minute not to run against Smitty. Well, somebody wrote in, you could still write in a candidate at that point in time. And somebody wrote in 1 vote for my dad. But also, Dick Rich had a dog, Fritz, that knew everybody in the community and knew everybody's house, knew where he could get fed. But Fritz got 2 votes, and my dad got 1 vote. So I always said, only guy I know that got beat out of an election by a dog.
That's a great story. Now, Fritz was a Weimaraner, and those are really independent dogs. And like you say, he was all over town. Everyone knew him. Went to the Little League field and trotted all over town after Rich going to work and everything. So
right, he would ride in the oil delivery trucks with him.
Would. I know the police picked him up every now and then and took him home.
Yes.
So that is a great story about Venice. What are some of the other things? Now, that cemetery was not your first investment in Venice, I take it?
No.
Tell me about some of those things.
Probably one of the most I'm proud of was Boris K. had purchased the old KMI buildings after they went out of business. And he purchased those and was going to tear them down and build condominiums there. Don Morgan was a friend of mine, and Don said, David, let's buy these buildings and save them. And we did. We bought them, we saved them, but during the process, 74 energy crisis came through. We virtually had 1 building completely sold out. We did not have our condominium declaration yet. And then the law was then if you didn't have a condominium declaration, their money was fully refundable. And the crisis hit, and we refunded everybody their money, but we continued on with the project. We were eventually successful in converting the 2 smaller buildings and the Venice Center Mall. The other building that we sold off, but we did do what we intended to do. We saved those buildings from the wrecking ball.
Now, just so everybody knows, those KMI buildings, Kentucky Military Institute, which was here in the 50s through 1970, more or less.
Right.
And then, so their dormitory and classrooms had been the San Marco Hotel.
Correct.
On Tampa Avenue.
Yes.
And that's Venice Center Mall now.
Correct.
Now, the other buildings that you're mentioning are which ones?
There's
Hotel Venice.
The Hotel Venice, which is now
it's now a nursing home.
Nursing
it has
home.
been nursing
Right.
home. Or,
and then there's 2 little buildings in behind there that are attached, not attached to anything, but they're part of the Venice Center Mall project.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
And
so those would have gone away, part of our heritage and history from the 1920s, John Nolan period.
Correct.
If you all hadn't stepped in and done what you could to save them.
Yes. Interesting story. A lot of homeless people were living in those buildings when we took over, and we knew that we had some liability. And we found a company that had dogs that we could get to turn loose in the building. And so we went the first night, third floor, and made the announcement, we're going down the second floor, but we're going to turn the dogs loose in a little bit, so everybody get out of the building. Went to the second floor, went to the first floor, and then made the announcement on all the floors, went back to the third floor and turned the dog loose. And then we heard people running and people clamoring to get out, and then we did the same thing the next night, and they were still back in there again. We did it the third or fourth night. It was pretty expensive for us to hire the dogs to do that. So after that, then we just went and made the announcement. We'd still hear them getting out, but we didn't have the dog anymore, but we eventually got them all out of there.
How many people do you think were living there then?
I would say we probably had 5 or 6 people that were living in that building at the time.
And that was in the 70s?
That was in the 70s. Because when they left, they left. The furniture, the beds, the mattresses, everything was still there.
Yeah.
When Boris K. bought it, he went through and just sold off all the wicker, all the good stuff, but still left all the mattresses and the steel frame beds.
And that was from the KMI days, or what was it from?
From the hotel days and from the KMI days.
Yeah,
Wow.
I believe KMI came in the 30s, though.
Yeah, okay. KMI's came in the 30s.
Okay.
And they closed that location in 1970.
Okay,
and then they closed in Kentucky in 73, I believe.
One of the things that people don't realize, this used to be a missile launching station at Venice, and they launched some large missiles out at the airport. So when they would launch those, it would rattle windows, it would break windows. They even had a provision where the people reported their broken windows, they could get glass to get their windows repaired. But when one of those rockets went off in the early 60s, I think they quit that about 64. But
they were tests.
Test
And did what time of day did they usually do that?
Those were early morning or late night.
Oh, okay. So you either woke up with them or went to bed with them.
When we first came, also it was angle parking on Venice Avenue, where the 3 blocks, and where Bank of America and the parking lot was a section of shops, and that's where the movie theater was. So I remember meeting at the movie theater when Grace Methodist Church started. That was where they held their first meetings and first church services. And didn't they have to climb the fire escape to get to the projection box?
The projection room was on the outside, so they had to go around to the alley, climb up a ladder to go out there to turn the projection on. There was no entrance from the theater to the projection booth.
That's fascinating. I didn't know that either about Grace United starting there, so that's quite interesting. And then
where the bookstore used to be, and I don't know the name of the business that's in there now, the middle of the second block,
right,
there was a bowling alley.
Oh, that's right.
And that was owned by Evelyn and George Botts, who Mr. Botts died in '57, I think, and then after David's mother died, David's dad married Evelyn Botts.
Oh.
So she came here in 1941. So
oh my goodness.
We heard some interesting stories from her.
Oh, I bet you did. And did they continue to run the bowling alley then, or?
They owned it for quite some time, and I was sitting in Venice Center Mall one day waiting to go into the restaurant, and this fellow said that he used to take care of the pins at the bowling alley, and he was a
pin setter.
He was a pin setter, but he had also attended KMI. So I said, then you work for my mother-in-law.
Well, and the KMI kids did have a lot to do with the changes that happened during that time in Venice. I mean, they were working, they were providing lots of entertainment, I understand, and their families were coming in and contributing to the economy.
I don't think the local boys liked it when they were here in the winter.
That's what I heard, that they competed pretty fiercely for the girls here.
Yeah. One of the things that and another thing I'm proud of, when I was on the council in the 70s, we decided that we needed to do some things for the youth. And we did a bond project, but one of the things we did was build the basketball courts on the corner of Venice Avenue and Harbor Drive. And if you look at those courts, you can see that they're set up that it could be converted to a tennis court, because the elder people really wanted more tennis, and they really give us a fit. We, Parks Advisory Board, kept insisting, no, we're going to put tennis courts. So as a concession, we agreed if they were not being used as basketball courts, that they could be converted to tennis courts. And they are the most used facility that we've had, and they've been that way since then.
They are. You go by Heckscher Park any night of the week and you'll see a basketball game going on there. People just show up and play.
Right.
And same with the tennis courts. They're always full as well.
Heckscher Park, too, had the community center. There was an old World War II barracks in there over where the playground is now. And the termites were doing a good job holding hands, so the building stayed up till probably that was in the 75 or so, when that was taken down and the new community center was built shortly after that. Then at the same time, from Venice City Hall to the beach, all of that in the park, the linear park there, was flat and sandspur patch. You couldn't walk through it without just sandspurs all over you. We did, in that same bond issue, took on that issue and made that the park that is and beautiful now. And I hear all the time, well, that was part of Nolan's project when he did. Well, Nolan was dead and gone a long time before that ever got developed.
Didn't quite get to it before everything crashed here when they were doing it the first time. So also the Centennial Park, I guess, was part of the KMI marching grounds.
Yes, and there was a lot of problems with getting that to a parking lot, because that was given, that property was given to the city to use as a park. So if we didn't use it a park, it was going to go back to the family. And some people said parking lot is not a park, so that's why you'll see a mixture of parking lot and park, everything there.
It's a wonderful spot. It's just the heart of town. It's like an old-fashioned center of town square, because you've got the gazebo and the fountain and all those things, but plenty of places to park as well.
We talked about my stepmother, Evelyn. I used to ask Evelyn, you've been here since '41, tell me what has happened to Venice that you don't like since 1941. And she said, everything that's been done has been an improvement, and I like every bit of it. And I think about when they had the old quarters out on Venice Avenue, and that was just really terrible shacks where the family that were living in there were living in shacks up above the mud. There was no grass. It was just filthy conditions. Nobody should ever have to live in that. And the improvements that have been made just there and elsewhere have been great and need to continue to be going.
I find it really interesting that a lot of the people who have lived here for a long time really appreciate all of the changes and the improvements, but it's the new people who probably didn't know what it was like before who come in and say, I fell in love with Venice, this is my Venice, don't change it. And it's kind of ironic that the people who have been here the longest are the ones who embrace change the most.
We're going to have growth. Everybody here has been from someplace else, because but as I used to say all the time, if you want to stop growth in Venice, you need to stop air conditioning and you stop mosquito control.
And then
if you'll
that
slow
will
it down,
take
you
care of
won't
it.
stop it. You'll slow it down. I remember early on going to places where when the sun started going down, the mosquitoes would come out and they would look like clouds coming in across the water, and that you could just virtually scrape them and catch them by handfuls. You would end up breathing in mosquitoes.
You have to go to the Everglades now to experience that, but that's what it was like everywhere around here then.
Yeah. And if we went to the drive-in movie, we had the
Pick.
that we would light and set on the dash to keep the
mosquitoes out of the
away.
car. Well, Joanne and David, it's been wonderful to talk to you and to hear all about how Venice was when you first found it, and all the things that you've been involved with over the years that have made a difference and made Venice the home that we all share today. And I thank you for being with us today, and I hope to see you again next time when we bring you more Venice Views.